started House Spirits Distillery, the brick and mortar distillery, in 2002. Started playing around with recipes, got our first product on the shelf in 2004.
This woman, Lisa, had this bottle of quote-unquote summer gin, and she's like, Ryan, there's these guys down in Portland, Oregon, you know, that are doing some really interesting things with spirits, and I'd love you to try this. So I'm like, well, yeah, of course. So she pours me a glass, and I was really captivated by the kind of the movement away from what I understood the current gin reality. I shared with them something I was becoming passionate about, which was I guess we call it now pre-Prohibition cocktail style, where the spirit is reacquainted with being the center of the drink and not the kind of hidden component. Back in 04, 05, we were still in what I would call the reverse engineered cocktail time period, where most drinks were about hiding the spirit. And I imagine that a talented distiller who wants to really display with their hard work, that cocktails weren't really on their radar. I remember thinking there was a light bulb happening with regards to like, wow, cocktails can actually be maybe a part of what a distiller is going to want to do moving forward. So over the next 7 months, we worked on the recipe together. We worked on the identity of the brand together. One of the things that has resonated worldwide is nobody's pushed back against the fact that we believe we're the first authentic bartender-distiller partnership in at least American history, and I don't know that in the world that's ever happened before.
I take it up to the bottle, and he takes it from the bottle to the glass. Yeah. There's no one who's better at explaining sort of the history and importance of cocktails in America than Ryan, and there's no one who is better at taking our base ingredient, our Aviation American Gin, and producing incredible, unexpected flavors in cocktails.
Krogstad was very respectful of what I might be able to bring to the table. Once he realized I wasn't going to make him like a red currant puree daiquiri with whiskey or something like that, I think he immediately was intrigued and gave me the benefit of the doubt, which I'm grateful for. Krogstad and I have always had this desire to maximize both flavor and drinkability at the same time. Starts as a product that the distillers wanted to kind of use to evolve the category and give their own perspective on it from just a single neat tasting perspective, and then we come together and it becomes a double-sided product, so to speak. Craft cocktail bars.
Yeah. A few breweries.
Yeah, the three liquids, man. Coffee, cocktails, and breweries. And in that little grid, 8 blocks by 8 blocks.
Thank you. More than any other spirit category, gin is an ingredient in cocktails. Very few people drink gin just neat.
Wanted it to be a gin you could both, that was really first and foremost a gin you could just drink on its own. Started as let's do a gin that can be drank on its own merits, neat. Almost, I would argue, a gin that a whiskey drinker could enjoy.
We don't really know what American gins tasted like because they all disappeared with Prohibition.
In 2000, my friend Robert Hess gave me a book called Cocktails of the 20th Century or 21st Century, one of the two, by Paul Harrington, another friend of ours in Spokane, Washington. And in that book were a variety of, I guess, vintage drinks, old drinks that most people didn't know about that were very interesting to me, and one of them was an Aviation. This Aviation really lit me up, and I was like, you know what, I actually think everybody loves gin. Every imbiber loves gin. Maybe they just don't know it yet.
We very specifically were trying to create the best gin that we could, a gin that we thought would be better than any other at recreating those classic American cocktails, pre-Prohibition cocktails. So we've essentially reproduced what was an American gin of the 1880s or 1890s.
Specifically, we coined a term called New Western gin, it's a universally used term to describe gins that seek a botanical democracy, so to speak, rather than a dictatorship of juniper. We're actually making a gin that highlights some of its alternative botanicals, and then, you talk about things that perhaps the American consumer can have a context with. A classic dry gin's like a sauté, where the juniper's the star and everything is meant to lift and press forward the qualities of the juniper in that spirit. Where I see what we do in some other brands is it's more like a salad. It's more like a total integrated experience. And of course it's gin, so the juniper has to be the defining characteristic of it. But when we created Aviation Gin, I think we were all captivated by the reality that none of the guidelines tell you how much juniper you can use. So it's all about where is it irresponsible to use so little juniper that you're just abusing the category, and where is it okay to bring it down enough to let the other ones play?
And I think juniper's a fantastic botanical to work with. It really heightens, it almost works like salt, you know, it really binds, it heightens flavors. Botanicals that we used were juniper, coriander seed, cardamom, sarsaparilla, orange peel, anise seed, and lavender. We basically created a little matrix and started naming botanicals and kind of putting them up there where we thought they belonged. Can achieve balance through using a whole bunch of different ingredients, but then you don't have distinct flavors. It just kind of tastes gray, it's muddy. I knew that we wanted to use as few botanicals as possible to produce that balance. And ideally, individual botanicals wouldn't just be floral, but they'd also maybe be herbal, or they'd be earthy and herbal, or earthy and citrusy. So we just took a leap and made our first test batch, and honestly, it wasn't bad. Initial test batch, we had way too little juniper, so we upped the juniper quite a bit.
Really spicy. Cardamom just really, to me, has such a pronounced tactileness to it. You know, like when it's very definitive, and I think, again, when we started Aviation, we were pretty darn heavy-handed with this, and it took a little bit of reining in to get it to kind of stay in its place, so to speak. So as I smell it, I'm like reminded of how powerful it used to be in the gin, and now how, you know, it's almost like what are you, breaking the horse, so to speak, you know? But yeah, I'm reminded how beautifully kind of base noted and earthy our gin is.
One of the great profiles of Aviation Gin is that it has this great texture, this kind of creamy richness. We were really going for that. It's part of what makes it great on its own, but also part of what takes the citrus well in a citrus cocktail. And so we were achieving this fantastic entry flavor, great aroma, great entry, great finish, like nice lingering citrus and floral notes, but really it was sort of dying on the mid palate. And that was the last botanical that we added, was something we needed mid palate. We didn't want to add sugar. The sarsaparilla is just such a great, it's really ephemeral quality. It's the one that's hardest to kind of put your thumb on. That was just sort of like the final, you know, that's really what brought it all together. That was the seventh botanical.
Gin hasn't been an explosive category for the past 50 years, and I think it's because, you know, it is in so many ways it's a neutral spirit with juniper, and juniper is not part of the common American palate space. If I can get them to that Aviation cocktail, if I can get them to the gimlet, and 10 out of 10 times I see their eyes, I see their pupils change. They're like, it's like they've had a life-changing experience, to be sure. And what I find is after that, I actually 100% of the time can get them to try it neat. And by the end of that little gauntlet, they're gin drinkers. I don't know if they're gin drinkers, I know they're Aviation drinkers. It's a cocktail that represents what I think could be a life-changing gin experience for so many people because of its interest and approachability. And the name just resonated. And articulating the fact that gin is broader than you think, gin is bigger than you think. This all begins with the re-articulation of what gin is to the consumer.
They like, oh no, I don't like gin. I'm just like, you're the person I want to talk to. Because we made this gin for you. Yeah. When I started a distillery, one thing I knew was that I wasn't going to try to copy someone else. So from the very get-go, we were like, we're going to make an American gin, not a London dry. We're in Portland, Oregon. We're not in London. You know, if we were starting a distillery in London when we started up, we would have been expected to produce a very juniper-forward, you know, London dry gin. classic dry gin. You have to blaze trails, and that's what sets you apart.